Hi, I'm Ron with Amazing Mile Marker Stops, and today I'm going to show you how to install a generator on your boat. Alright, so we got our new generator. This is a Phaser 8kW, and it is securely installed. Now they don't pre-drill any holes for you, so you just pick a spot where you think would be good and put some bolts in. I use 3/8 inch bolts just to make it good and hefty and strong, through bolted all the way through. I ordered our generator with a sound enclosure, but to get it down in the engine room, we had to take the sound enclosure off. So if you order yours with the sound enclosure, it'll come completely enclosed. You may not need to disassemble it like we did. If you order it without the sound enclosure, it'll still look generally like this. So now we're going to start hooking it up and take that step by step. So let's go ahead and get started. Normally you'd probably want to put your sound enclosure, assemble it before you do anything else, but as you can see, I have very little headroom above here, not a whole lot of room back behind, and so I looked at where the exhaust hose hooks up, and I think it'd be a lot easier to get to before I mount this panel. So right now I've just fed my hose through the hole that they provide for it. I'm gonna go ahead and hook the exhaust hose up to the elbow, and then we'll mount this panel. Of course, this is your exhaust elbow. All right, I think that's good enough. And this hose, by the way, is 2-inch. Is what you need to put on their exhaust elbow. And then you hook the other end of your wet exhaust hose to your muffler, and of course plumb it accordingly to overboard discharge. Now when you install your wet exhaust, if your generator is mounted below the water line, you probably need a siphon brake on this exhaust. My generator is above the water line, so I'm not going to be installing a siphon on mine, but I just want to make you aware of that. Now that we got the hose hooked up, we can go ahead and start the assembly of our sound enclosure. This enclosure is actually fairly easy to assemble and disassemble. Everything screws in from the bottom, pretty much. They have permanent nuts on the inside. I got the 4 bolts started. I'm not going to tighten it down just yet because I got to put this panel in. There's also a connector here I had to remove. It uses this nut. Which is quite big, so you're going to need either a big open-end wrench, a big crescent wrench, or something that'll span it. I've got this plumbing tool, it'll span it, and we'll get that on there. It doesn't have to be super duper tight, just enough to hold it. This, by the way, is plug in an external control panel if you want to have a separate control panel, like up on your helm. I'm probably going to add one later, but I was being cheap right now. It's like an extra 250 bucks or something, and you can easily add it later, so I just opted to do that. Right now I just need a generator, and I'll get the bells and whistles later. Next, we're going to reinstall the control panel. This, again, normally comes all mounted. I took it apart to be able to get the generator in the boat. At this point, I think we're ready to go ahead and put the rest of our sound enclosure together. So Next step is to put the top on. Once you got the top on, the rest is just doors that just latch in. So we can go ahead and tighten down all our bolts at this point. So you want to hook your raw water hose up to the inlet here, and then connect it through your sea strainer. All right, finally we want to hook our sea strainer up to our seacock so we can get water to the generator. Now our water's all hooked up. All right, next we need to put in this put in our barbed fittings for the fuel supply in and the fuel return. So the supply is closest to your raw water hose. The one furthest from the raw water hose is your return. And the first thing we need to do is they have a plug in both these. So we need to remove those plugs. Now I know from talking to the manufacturer that these generators are tested before they're sent out to make sure they work. And so there's been fuel in it. So it's possible when we remove these plugs, some amount of fuel will come out, just in case there's more than a drip. I've got the bucket. A little bit more came out of that one. Just so we can get the wrench to it, we're going to do the supply line first, and that should be a 1/4 inch quarter inch NPT to a 5/16 inch barb. And since we're using fuel, you want to make sure you get the special Teflon tape to use with fuel. Once we've got our supply line on, then we want to do the return line. And this again is 1/4 inch NPT, the same as the supply, but the barbed fitting is only a 3/16 inch. So 1/4 inch to 3/16 inch. All right. If your fuel tank is mounted below the generator like mine is, then you have to worry about your fuel lines getting drained. When you shut the generator off, the fuel in this return line will drain out into the tank, and an air pocket will come up into your generator, and then you won't be able to start your generator. There's several ways you can solve that problem. One is to have your return line go all the way to the bottom of your fuel tank, and that way it'll keep fuel in there. It won't get that air brake in it. I looked at that. I couldn't find any fitting for the type of tank I have that would work for that. So that's the best way. But the next best thing to do is to put a check valve in the line. That will keep the air pocket from coming up and getting into your engine. If you're going to use that route, make sure you get a quality check valve. Don't get the cheapest one on the market. Try to get a good one. The one I got uses a ball to seat inside of an O-ring, and it's spring loaded. So that hopefully will seal it up and keep the air from coming up in it. I also bought a spare because if this fails, and all check valves fail eventually, when it fails, your generator's going to quit working. So if you use this route, have a spare on board, And first time it fails, you can change it out. Double check, make sure your arrow is going in the direction of the fuel flow. You always want to make sure your fuel lines are good and tight at every point, particularly your supply, not so much your return, but your supply line. If any air gets into that line, it's going to shut your engine down. Now when you hook up your fuel lines, make sure your supply line runs through some sort of filter, water separator filter. Fuel lines are all hooked up. Next thing is to finish the wiring side. You want to put your DC cables to go to from the battery to the generator, your start battery, through one of these two holes. I suppose it doesn't matter which, but I'm going to choose the back one. Just because it seems to make more sense. Both these need to have a 3/8 inch connector on it, and this is number 4 gauge wire I'm using. I removed that one. It's a bolt that holds the starter motor in, and I put the negative cable on there, and I think that'll work just fine. And then connect your positive cable to the solenoid on the starter motor. Your positive cable for the main power leaving the generator and going to your AC panel or wherever you have it going to hooks up to the back of this breaker. I can get some light on that so you can see it. There's a breaker right there. All right, so your hot out, your hot to your panel attaches here. This is the hot coming in. This is already wired up by phaser. Now if you look over here, this little panel here, this is the hot leg, and that goes over to the circuit breaker on this line right here. This is where you're going to hook your neutral up to right here. And this is where your wires are supposed to go out. And if you don't have a sound enclosure, that's where your wires would go out of the control box. But the sound enclosure is right up against the outside of that. And so you can't go out it if you have a sound enclosure on. So what I found was right there, you can see my black wire going up into the box. There's a big enough gap there. The wires can go through there just fine. So now we're going to wire up the neutral. All right, if you don't already have one of these, if you're going to work with big wire, you need to get one of these. This is not bolt cutters. This is wire cutters, and you see it's round. So it's made to cut the wire from all sides. And it works very easily. A lot better than using dikes. Another tip is when you're using heavy gauge wire, an easy way to cut it, again, rather than using dikes or wire cutters, is to just go to Home Depot, Lowe's, or wherever and get these little pipe cutters. Are made for cutting copper pipe, and they do great for getting a really nice, clean, pretty cut on this heavy gauge wire. And just like if you're cutting a pipe, you're just going to spin it around. Now you want to keep an eye out, because once it gets to the wire, if you keep tightening it, it will start cutting your wire too. But usually you can hear when you break through the insulation, because it has kind of a crunching sound. And then you can grab a pair of pliers, or you can take a pair of dikes and put it in the slit, get behind it, and just pull it off. And it makes for a very nice, clean cut. just like the back of the circuit breaker that's in there, the neutral terminal is also a 1/4 inch. So you want number 6 gauge to a 1/4 inch lug. And just slip that on. Now, if you can work with a lot of heavy gauge wire and you don't have one of these, you need to get one. This is a hydraulic crimper, and it sure makes life easy. Makes a nice, pretty little crimp, and it's on there really good. All right, we're ready to install that. So once we have both wires connected inside the control box, I'm gonna go ahead and put the lid back on. All right, once you have your control box sealed back up, then you hook the other ends of the wires, the hot wire and the neutral wire, to your breaker panel. Now some may ask, what about the ground wire, the green ground wire? This system is designed as a floating system. It only has a hot and a neutral, so it has no ground wire. It doesn't require one. But if you feel safer and more secure with a ground wire, then you can run a ground wire to your ship's ground and hook it up in one of these somewhere. Just hook it up to the chassis of your engine, and then you have ground. But you're allowed to do that. It's okay, but it's not required. All right, we've got everything hooked up. The raw water's hooked up, the fuel's hooked up, all the electrical's hooked up. We are ready to do the pre-start checks on the engine. So you want to check your coolant level, which I've already done. It's good. They tested this engine in the factory before they sent it, so it was run just before it gets shipped to you. So everything's already full, but we're going to double check. So next we want to check, which I think is kind of cool. You're only going to see this once, so this is just kind of neat. But there's my oil level. Now level it, and the important thing is, can you see the oil? No, but it's there. Lots of oil. Look at that, clear as can be. That'll never happen again. Next time I check this oil, it'll be black. All right, now we need to prime the engine to get the fuel initially from the fuel tank into the engine. So the first thing you want to do is loosen this, which is the air vent to the fuel, but we've cracked that slightly to let air escape. So now what we want to do is turn the generator to the run position. Do not try to start it yet. Just turn it to run, and that should turn on the electric fuel pump and start pumping fuel out of our fuel tank, which will fill our array core and then fill up the system. So let's check that out. Yeah, we can hear it. All right, here comes fuel into our array core. Now, if you don't have an electric pump to prime your array core, you can take this cover off and just pour some fuel in there until it's all the way full, and then put your cover back on. All right, see the bubbles coming out? That's our air escaping. All the air that's down in this array core, it's all getting pushed out. That's what we want. We want to let that run until the bubbles quit. While you're doing this, it might be a good idea to put some of these absorbent pads. I've got them stuffed all up underneath here to absorb this fuel that's spilling. Alright, now you see no more bubbles are coming out, it's just solid fuel. So now we want to tighten that. Don't over tighten that bolt there. Just snug it down. Next you want to loosen this bolt right here. directly behind your manual stop, and that's your air vent for your injector pump. And then do the same thing. Turn the generator on, but don't start it. That starts your electric pump, and you see the air bubbles coming out. Now it's got a good solid stream. Go ahead and shut that down. Turn your pump off. Make sure you open your seawater, your raw water seacock there. All right, we've got water, raw water, we've got fresh water coolant, we've got oil, and we've got fuel, and everything's wired up. So we are ready to try and turn her on and see what happens. Now normally I don't use a preheater in southern temperatures. I'm currently sitting in South Georgia and it's 90 degrees outside, so I don't usually worry about a preheater, but I'm going to use it this time because it's the first time I've ever fired up the engine, and I want to do everything exactly the way they say in the book. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn it to preheat. We're going to turn the generator on, and we're going to put it to preheat for 5 seconds, and then we're going to go to start and see if she fires up. So y'all ready? You want to go check and make sure you got raw water spitting out. Okay, what I'm going to do now is a sound test. I myself wondered, is it worth the extra $1,200 or whatever it was for the sound enclosure? I'm sure other people had the same question. So I'm going to let you see the difference. So right now it's running with all the doors off the sound enclosure, so it does have a partial enclosure on it, but I don't know if it's doing much since all the doors are off. So I'm going to set the camera down, and I'm not going to move it while I put all the doors on, and then you'll be able to see the difference from right now until after it's completely closed up, and we'll see what happens. And there it is. Hear the sound difference between the sound enclosure not on and it on. Seems to me it makes a lot of difference, but it's actually pretty quiet, so I'm impressed. I'm gonna do one more step just to see what it's like, and I'm gonna put the deck plate back down. And there it is with the deck plate down. This is what it sounds like. It's a hum. You know it's there. But I imagine after a while we'll tune it out. We could certainly watch TV over the hum. We could have a conversation over this hum. We could definitely sleep with the air conditioners running over this hum. So pretty good overall. Thumbs up to Phaser. If you'd like to help us make more of these videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free to you, but helps us more than you know. And don't forget to check out the nation's largest free online travel guide for boaters, AmazingMileMarkerStops.com. And remember, don't just cruise.
Visit Amazing Mile Marker Stops.